It is the year 10 house. A Mexica artist bends over his work, striking with colorful inks, illustrating on thick Spanish paper. He remembers the stories of his people, how they walked for hundreds of years through sorrow and war and rebirth to find the place where the eagle would come. He pauses for a moment, his hand above the parchment, and then bends forward again, setting down how they came to live here in the middle of the water and the mountain, where they built the greatest city in the world at the very center of the universe. What is a map? In our era of constant connection, we're used to seeing streets, place names, or satellite images on our maps. We think of them as representations of the physical world. We use maps casually and never really ask this question. But a map is more than just a shot of something from overhead. Choices are always being made, with some things included and others left out. Google Maps, for instance, tells us nothing about the history of a place, instead focusing mainly on asking us where we want to go. But a map always tells a story, and great maps, like the one we'll look at today, can tell stories that touch the deepest mysteries of place and time. This map, bursting with storytelling and cultural style, is one of the most fascinating pieces of cartographic art ever created. It's part of a 16th century book called the Codex Mendoza and is referred to as the Frontispiece, or title page. It's not actually the front page, but it's so striking that it's been known as that ever since it became famous. The people who made the Codex are usually known as the Aztecs, but in this video, I'll be calling them the Mexica, and I'll explain why later. The map was put to paper around the year 10 house, or 1541 by European reckoning. Made by a Mexica artist or artists unknown to us today, it preserves and presents the city of Tenochtitlan, the belly button of the cosmos, the great city of the Mexica, in stellar color and iconography. And yet, as a map, it may seem to us at first like it's missing something, street names or building footprints. But in fact, the map lacks nothing. It shows us the true layout of the great city, not only in space, but in time and in spirit. It guides us through the very meaning of this place called Tenochtitlan. We see the city laid out and divided into parts. We don't know if the Mexica placed north at the top, but still 4 familiar cardinal directions are represented in the 4 quadrants of the city: north, south, east, and west. Each of these quadrants may have had some meaning which is lost to us today, but something we do know is that the Mexica had a cardinal direction that we don't have: the center. And in the very center of the map, and at the center of the city itself, we see an image familiar to us, an image we also find on the flag of Mexico, here in one of its earliest preserved renderings. The god Huitzilopochtli, the left-handed hummingbird or eagle, perched on the notchli, or prickly pear cactus, growing from a rock, Tetl. The name of the city is built from these words, Tenochtitlan. This image recalls the culminative moment of the prophecy of the Mexica who, wandering from their home of Aztlan for hundreds of years, were told to watch for this sign and to build their new home where they saw it. This homeland, Aztlan, is where we get the term Aztecs. However, during their long wandering, Huitzilopochtli renamed them, saying that from then on, these people would be called the Mexica and Aztecs no longer. Mexica is the preferred name today, for that is what these people called themselves. That the Mexica took their name from their patron god, and that this god's image is in the center of the map, tells us that the Mexica did not see themselves as just another people. The center of Tenochtitlan, the center of the Mexica universe, is not just a happenstance place. It's the place where the gods intersect with our world. And around this center lies the city, divided up by brilliant canals, ringed with water. Tenochtitlan was built on an island and expanded by careful labor over the years, as we see here in other depictions of the city. In each quadrant there are figures, humans, plants, structures, such as the skull rack or tzompantli, where sacrificial victims and captured warriors' skulls would be displayed. This structure is possibly a temple, perhaps an early stage of the Templo Mayor, which became one of the most impressive structures of the Mexica city, and remnants of which still exist today. The plants include maize, agave, reeds, plants deeply important to the spiritual and physical way of life of the Mexica. The men are likely the 10 founders of the city, whose names are indicated by the symbols attached to them with small black lines. This, for instance, is a tototl, water bird, and this is shukaki, person wearing turquoise-colored sandals. The men also have distinctive hairstyles, signifying that they're distinguished warriors. Yet one man still stands out. His skin is covered in ritual ash, his ear is red from ceremonial bloodletting, and he wears a loose hairstyle. This is a priest. He sits on a woven reed mat and is the only man with a speech glyph before his mouth. This is Tenoch, the chief speaker when the city was founded and the leader of the group. Under the city, we see images related to its founding, the conquering of nearby tribes by the Mexica. Their temples burn, while the Mexica wield clubs, one obsidian-studded. This is probably part of the founding stories of the city. That is, for many years before finding the place to begin their city, the Mexica had been vassals of more powerful neighbors, trying to survive amongst hostile people, often serving as mercenaries. It's unlikely, then, that the Mexica, upon founding their city, immediately rose to dominance of the surrounding. But this scene still serves a clear purpose. It reinforces the story of the map, a story of a divinely guided people arising to great power. Around the entire map and story lie calendar glyphs, each representing a year in the Mexica 52-year cycle of time called the Shumopili. Each new cycle of 52 years was marked by ceremonies of purification, in particular the fire drill ceremony. In this ceremony, all fires would be extinguished and born again from a new fire, created with a fire drill in the body of a sacrifice, typically a captured warrior. Then this fire would be distributed by the priests to all the people for the beginning of a new 52-year cycle. The typical story of the 72-page Codex Mendoza is that it was commissioned by Antonio de Mendoza, the viceroy of New Spain, for the purpose of being sent to King Charles V to inform him about the history of the Mexica, his new subjects. But there's actually very little evidence for this. There are no marks on the Codex itself that indicate its commissioning by Mendoza, and its traditional style seems aimed at other Mexica, not Europeans. This deeply traditional style is part of what makes the Codex so valuable today. You can see, for instance, that the Codex Mendoza shows figures in two-dimensional profile, with strong, bold lines, a general lack of perspective, and little importance paid to filling in background details. Anything that is shown on the page has importance. Flames or plants are drawn in an artistic manner, not in any attempt to be photorealistic. However, many other codices from the same time weren't done the same way and show mixtures of European and Mexica style. We can see this in the Relación de Michoacán. This is another codex made at about the same time, which was actually prepared for Antonio de Mendoza, as it shows in an illustration in the book itself, in order for him to understand the politics and history of the Purépecha, a tribe to the west of Tenochtitlan. In the Relación de Michoacán, we see something in between the Codex Mendoza and a more European painting style. Figures are still mostly two-dimensional, but they're placed in wider scenes that are more fleshed out with background, and blood or other details are given more of a photorealistic appearance. The Codex Mendoza's traditional style and the lack of evidence of its commissioning has led to many questions about its origins. It's true that the paper that the codex is made with is from Spain, which certainly indicates something about its provenance, but it rarely mixes European and Mexica styles. Scholars have noted that some shading in the book, as well as one page that has a bit of perspective on it, may have European influence. But overall, the book seems to make no real effort to fit to European traditions or to teach Europeans about anything. The book itself was only assembled and bound by the Spanish in order to fit a more European familiarity with bound books. The written notations that you see covering the page were done by a Spanish friar in order to add context to its images before it was shipped to Spain. The final page of the manuscript also states that the interpreter had only 10 days to add the notations before the codex was shipped off, and perhaps as a result, he made numerous mistakes. We can see this on the map, where these two figures are given the wrong names. This man is Asatzitl, Hare of the Grass Reed, and this man is Asolopan, Jaguar Banner, but their names have been mistakenly exchanged. It is possible that this book, despite being made on Spanish paper, was not explicitly made for Spanish purposes, but instead was made by Mexica artists for their own reasons, for people who would understand its symbols and stories. Perhaps it was largely copied from older works in order to preserve them. We just don't know for sure. But this does make an impact on the map, because the stories being told are Mexica stories, likely laid out for Mexica eyes, and only later notated for European knowledge. This is a cultural history, and not just a map. Whatever the circumstances surrounding the Codex's creation, it did end up being shipped from America. But what happened once it was on the ocean is also unclear. There are some indications that it may never have reached Spain, and that French pirates stole the book and secreted it to France. But these stories are hard to substantiate and might just be fancies imagined by later chroniclers. In any case, it didn't stay very long in Spain, and was in the ownership of French cosmographer André Thevet as early as 1553, 10 years after it was made. We can see that Thevet, in a weird flex, felt the need to write his name directly on the map page, stating that he was cosmographer to the king. He also wrote his name in 5 other places in the document. Thanks, André. Anyway, the codex changed hands repeatedly in the ensuing years until finding a home at Oxford University in 1659, where it still is today. It was reproduced in woodcut and written about by Samuel Purchas, and was received with some excitement in the early days, but was subsequently forgotten until being rediscovered in 1831. Today, it remains one of the most important documents for historians of Mesoamerica. The Codex has come down to us today over a complicated history, yet it stands on its own as a wonderful example of cartography. The careful, detailed work is as stunning now as when it was made. The use of iconography and space in laying out not only the city's geography, but its historical and spiritual importance, leaves mapmakers today with many lessons to learn. We have to ask what a map really is, and if it's more than just laying out streets and houses and trying to be physically precise. Perhaps maps are storytelling devices, histories, and art. Maybe we can tell our story with them just as these Mexica told theirs, or maybe our maps already tell our story, though we don't know it, a story of a society obsessed with physical precision and neglectful of spiritual meaning. While sometimes called an example of idealized cartography, the map actually does much more than represent an idea of Tenochtitlan. It represents the most real things about the city. The true portraits of our homes are not floor plans, but what we do in them, how they came to be, and what they mean to us. The Mexica who made this map and who made their city knew the truth about the sacred nature of the place they lived and have left us with this incredible view into their world.